For most people who develop CFS or hypersensitive nervous system or long COVID or anything under the bucket of hypersensitive nervous system, and if they can't find any other specific cause for this, like mold or Lyme or any of that stuff, if they can't find any of those causes or they've treated those things and they're still dealing with these symptoms, then yes, you can confidently say this is a hypersensitive nervous system. Now, what causes this hypersensitive nervous system if it's not some environmental thing or some pathogen or virus or something like that? How's it going, guys? Miguel here from CFS Recovery. In this video, I'm gonna be answering the question, should I try vitamin IV therapy, vitamin B12s, Myers cocktails, adrenal extract IV treatments? Now, I can speak about this having gone through it personally, and actually in my whole life, actually within a few year period, I've done over 100 IV treatments thinking it was gonna help me. I actually have something here, so just in case people don't actually believe I did over 100 IV treatments, I have all the invoices here. It all says adaptogens plus IV adrenal. So I spent a lot of money on these IV treatments, these Myers cocktails, and I did actually feel a difference at the time. Now, I can talk about this all day because I am very familiar with, the whole pattern of what happens when you take a lot of this stuff. The thing is, it can help, but it won't fix the root cause, okay? And what do I mean by that? For most people who develop CFS or hypersensitive nervous system or long COVID or anything under the bucket of hypersensitive nervous system, and if they can't find any other specific cause for this, like mold or Lyme or any of that stuff, if they can't find any of those causes or they've treated those things and they're still dealing with these symptoms, then yes, you can confidently say this is a hypersensitive nervous system. Now, what causes this hypersensitive nervous system if it's not some environmental thing or some pathogen or virus or something like that? Well, a lot of it is due to lifestyle, due to thinking habits, due to patterns of thought or the way you do things physically, right? Because the way you think leads to actions. So if someone is a perfectionist, if someone has some traits of ADD, if they're overly analytical, if they are a type A personality, go, always trying to succeed, always trying to be the best, they're going to push themselves to typically work harder than other people, typically try to achieve more, typically try to do a better job or the best job that they can do, try to beat everybody else. This will end up with working longer hours, taking on more than they can handle, saying yes to things, right? This is another big one. Not knowing how to say no or to turn down opportunities. So they end up overextending themselves and they add so much onto their plate, more than their nervous system can handle. And it eventually gets to a point where something like a virus, something tragic, or something life-changing happens that's stressful, and it causes them to go over their stress threshold. Now, if you really think about it, once you go over that stress threshold, yes, you may deal with all these health issues, shortness of breath, dozens and dozens of symptoms, insomnia, even gut issues, right? So you would think that, okay, well, if I treat those things with IVs or adrenal extract in the IVs or B12 shots, then that should fix it. But what is the root cause? What's actually causing that? It's all these things over here, all the stressors that we stacked on those things. So here's what typically happens with people, and here's what happened to me, right? I was in a pretty bad place. I had tried all these different medications. I tried seeing medical professionals, acupuncture, massage, chiropractor, therapy, all of these different things, but nobody really understood CFS or what was going on, or they didn't understand what was happening to me. So I went to this naturopath, not the one that I went to who gave me hydrocortisone, which that's a whole nother story. You can actually find that video up here. Not that naturopath, but this is another naturopath. This guy actually helped one of my previous personal training clients. He helped her beat cancer. And it was a less invasive, aggressive form of treatment that they did. So he recommended me to her, and I said, this is great. This guy, he did what most doctors can't seem to do. So let me go to him. Let's see what's going on. And he said, yeah, we need to start rebuilding your adrenals, right? So something similar to what my previous naturopath said, because she said, yeah, your adrenals are basically fried. We need to jumpstart your system. Here's hydrocortisone. That didn't work, obviously, if you watched my other video. But he said, okay, well, we can't go that aggressive. So we need to build up your adrenals over time, right? Now, typically in a case like yours, you can't work out. You can still function, but you're having horrible sleep. You're always stressed. You're dealing with the dozens of symptoms. We need to build up your adrenals slowly because you have that allergic reaction to the hydrocortisone. So typically this will require 25 to 30 treatments of IV therapy. Right now, if you know anything about naturopaths, they are not cheap, and typically they're not covered by insurance. If you have private insurance, yes, they may be covered, but only up to a certain point. So I actually had coverage under my parents at the time. I think I had 1,000 each. So my mom had 1,000 for me, my dad had 1,000. So I had up to 2,000 to spend at a naturopath. But these IV treatments, basically you come in, you sit down in this room, they bring an IV bag and they put a needle in your arm, right? And then they let this thing drip for about 45 minutes. And typically these would run $100 to $150 from what I've heard. Me personally, I paid $150 every single time I went to do an IV treatment. So we started at just once per month, right? And actually at the beginning, I started to feel pretty decent. I was able to work a bit more. I was able to walk around more. I was able to sleep a little bit better. My symptoms would start coming down and I'd say, wow, this is great, it's working. So after about 6 months of one IV treatment a month, I'm working almost full time. I went from part-time to full-time. Here's the problem. Because I went back to work and I thought I was doing better and I'm like, okay, I feel decent, right? If my activity level was here and my symptom levels were here, with the IV treatments, my symptom levels were now down here, but my activity levels increased. Right? So every time my symptoms came down a little bit and I did have more energy, any extra energy that I had, I increased my activity. Here's the problem. This was not teaching me how to manage my energy levels and manage my stress thresholds, because with the extra energy I did have from the IV treatments, I would go out and use it all. I'd say, wow, okay, I'm feeling good now. Let me go out and hang out with my friends. Let me go add another 2 clients this week. Let me go do this and that. And basically, you are kind of sinking your ship and creating more holes in your ship as you're scooping water out of that sinking ship, right? So picture that. You have all these holes, you have water leaking in. Essentially, as the IV treatments, it's kind of like fixing this problem of not having enough energy. So it's kind of like we're plugging holes. But in doing more things, we're creating more holes and we're creating bigger holes. You're basically playing life at a higher level. Your stakes are higher because you're biting off more than you could chew. So eventually, after about 6 months, ended up crashing again, of course, worked too much. So I end up in the hospital, go crashing back down to square one. Okay, so I told him about it. He said, okay, well, we're not doing enough IV treatments then. We need to double it up. So we're gonna go 2 IV treatments a month instead of 1. So we did 2 a month. And then again, I started feeling the same pattern I felt when we initially started it. So I did that, started feeling better, started moving more, started getting back on my feet over a few months. And within 6 months, I was back to working full time again, right? So probably the first month I was just couch bound. Second month I was housebound. Third month I was able to function outside, drive, do all these things. By month 4, 5, and 6, I was really working again. By month 6, I was working almost full time, and I was still very symptomatic. I couldn't work out, even though I was a personal trainer, which is ironic. And I built myself back up again. But did I learn my lesson? No, because I figured I correlated me crashing first time when we did that first round of IV treatments for 6 months. We just assumed that the problem wasn't me adding on activity. The problem was we weren't getting enough IV treatments in. So we double up. And what do you think happened? 6 months later, I crashed again. End up in the hospital, overdid it. I can't breathe. I think I'm having a stroke. We call the ambulance. Can't work, lose all my clients again. So I go back to him and say, hey, I guess it wasn't enough IVs. And he says, okay, we need to give you more powerful stuff. So it wasn't fixing the root cause. I was almost running on synthetic energy. When I think back now, that's how I see it. I was running off of an external power source, which is basically the IVs, because without the IVs, there is no way that I could have increased activity that much. I didn't even build a strong foundation, because every time the IV gave me energy, I would go out and use it. And this is where I learned that lesson eventually years later, that you can have the best medication in the world, you can have the best diet, you can have the best sleeping practices at nighttime, if you're not managing your stress threshold, if you're not identifying those roadblocks, those things that stress you out, you don't know how to control your stress levels, you're gonna keep falling into this cycle of pushing and crashing. If you can't control how much activity you do, if you can't say no to certain things, you're gonna end up overdoing it. So we quadrupled. We were doing IV treatments every single week. And that happened for another 6 months, right? And after 6 months, I was actually feeling solid. This was probably the most I had built myself up to this point, right? And I had pushed and crashed myself probably, I don't even know how many times at this point, 4, 5, 6 points. And at this point, 6 months in, it was the best I ever felt in this entire recovery journey since getting sick, since that first crash a few years prior. I crashed in the library, and from that day on, I could not work out. So it had been about 2 years or 2.5 years being on this journey. Finally, I felt nearly fully functional. Now, I still had serious difficulty sleeping. I still had exercise intolerance. I couldn't really fully work out, but I could do some cardio. I could lift some weights, like showing clients how to do stuff, right? And I was okay. I could pull pretty long days, but at the time, of course, I bite off more than I can chew. I got into a relationship at that point, and every weekend we're going out, we're staying out late, and it was just an extra stimulus on my nervous system. So I was working full time, I was in this new relationship, and also we would go to a lot of raves together. Now, I didn't do any drugs at the raves, but all that stimulus, I'd be working all week, pretty tired by the end of it because I was one of the busiest trainers at the gym at the time. I rebuilt my clientele. Of course, pushing my limits, always trying to be the best, had to beat everybody else, type A personality. So I was working full time a ton. I was sleeping late. I was pretty stressed out because I always had to be the best at the gym, but be the number one trainer. And we were going to these raves every few months. So lots of really loud music, lots of light, especially at the end of the week when I'm pretty dang tired. Meanwhile, I'm doing IVs almost every week. I was actually doing pretty well, but the thing is my body could not sustain that. So it got to the point where about 8 months into that of doing IVs every week, I started feeling pretty brutal. I really couldn't sleep. I was yawning uncontrollably for a full hour straight every day at around 2 or 3 p.m. Still couldn't drink coffee, still couldn't do full-on workouts. I was telling my naturopath, I said, this is getting pretty intense. I could feel myself slipping. I said, all right, well, we need to give you more IVs, okay? At this point, I had spent thousands and thousands on IVs, but it was the only thing that seemed to work at the time, because in addition to that, I was also taking adaptogens, which you can find in my video up here, where I talk about adaptogens and ashwagandha and adrenal extract supplements, things like that. So I was taking those things in addition to these vitamin IV treatments, and it was the only thing that seemed to be giving me traction. So I attributed pretty much all my progress to this thing. I didn't know anything about brain retraining. I didn't know anything about pacing. I didn't know anything about controlling my response to symptoms or stressors. I didn't know anything about the threshold at this point. So we were doing 2 IV treatments a week. And it got to the point where even on 2 IV treatments a week, I just kept working and working. And I could feel my body hitting a wall. There were days where I couldn't even get out of bed, but I knew I was getting that IV treatment that day. So I'd drag myself out of bed, go to the IV treatment, almost like my power up, almost like refilling a gas tank, right? So I go there, get the IV, then I go straight to my shift at work, and then I go straight home. And it got to the point where the IV treatments, before they would last me about a month, it would give me decent energy for about a month. Now it was lasting me for about 3 days. And now the crashes were way harder. So now I really didn't have any energy. I was relying, almost all my energy came from these IV treatments. I'd get a refill every 3 or 4 days. So not only was it catching up on me financially, I was digging myself into a deeper hole because I figured I cannot stop this IV treatment. If I feel this bad on the IV treatment, imagine how bad I'm gonna feel off it and off all these other supplements. But eventually got to a point where I just could not go on anymore. And that's when I had my biggest crash. And I was bedridden for 8 months shortly after I started implementing these 2 IV treatments a week, because your nervous system, it has its limit. You can only run on some external source of power for so long. You can do it for a little bit temporarily, but if you don't change the habits that cause you to overpush yourself and overextend yourself and go over your stress threshold in the first place, you're not really treating the root cause if you don't change that thing. So a lot of times these supplements, these medications, these IV treatments, it can actually put you in a deeper hole if you don't know how to use them to your advantage. Now, if I did these IV treatments and I did the brain retraining, it might have been a different story. it could have worked in my favor. But I think for me, I needed to learn that hard lesson to realize that nothing outside of me is going to fix this situation. I have the answer within my own brain in order to make this work. So after that, after doing about 2 IV treatments a week for about, I think it was a couple months, I completely crashed. That's when I moved into my grandparents' place. They were spoon feeding me for the next 6 months, and then I was in a hospital for 2 months after that. And that's when I met my doctor. So for me, overall, do I regret taking the IVs? No, because it taught me lessons that I never would have learned. It made me crash to the point where I needed to get to the hospital at that specific time, in that specific city. And I was so severe that I had to go live with my grandparents in a certain city. And I got so sick that I was paired up with a doctor eventually who taught me all of these things, who taught me exactly what I needed to do to fix the hypersensitive nervous system, who taught me the science of all of this stuff, and to be here right in front of you today through video and reach so many people all around the world. So do I regret it? No, absolutely not. Do I recommend IV treatments? Personally, no, because they didn't work for me. And actually, we've had dozens and dozens of people apply to our programs who share a similar story. They also tried IV treatments, but it wasn't fixing the root cause. It may help temporarily, but it also gets very expensive and it's not really fixing the root cause. If you want to recover and you want to stay recovered for good, never have to worry about relapsing again or being stuck in this hole that you're in right now, then IV treatment is not something that's going to be a long-term fix. It's going to be brain retraining, it's going to be neuroplasticity, it's going to be recalibrating your hypersensitive nervous system so you can fix this thing for good. So I haven't seen it work for anybody else, to be honest. Obviously, it didn't work for me. I haven't gotten here because of these IV treatments. So overall, I probably spent, I don't know, $10,000 on these IV treatments, $10,000 to $15,000. But do I regret it? No, because it taught me a valuable lesson that I have the power within to fix this problem and nothing outside me is going to save me. Because I think it's a very disempowering belief to think that something is just going to come along and save you and that you're helpless, that this thing fell from the sky called CFS and you've just been cursed with this thing and there's nothing you can do about it. I think it's a much more empowering belief system and way of thought once you realize that you do have the power within to fix you, and you can spend all the money on this kind of stuff and it ain't going to fix the root cause. You are going to fix the root cause. So that's all I wanted to share in this video. I hope this helps. I hope this shares some insight on you debating if you should do IV treatments or not. Now, I'm not saying don't do it. Go for it, right? For all I know, maybe you need it. Maybe you're deficient in some things. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I'm speaking solely on personal experience and things I've seen help hundreds of people all around the world. So you do you. This is not medical advice. And again, everything I share on this channel, it's for people who have had tests, scans, they've had multiple appointments with doctors and specialists, and they still can't find anything that's helping, and they still aren't finding any relief from any of the treatments or supplements or medications that they've been trying. So people typically come to us and find our channel as a last resort. This is if you tried everything else and it has failed. If you have done your due diligence, then yes, you can chalk it up to a hypersensitive nervous system. But if you haven't, in the meantime, go get your tests and scans done and make sure you rule out all the things that could be potentially causing this. So if you did want some extra help on this, is just one of the many topics we cover inside a lot of our programs. Click the link down below. You can learn more about the Recovery Academy, where we're helping hundreds of people all around the world recover from long COVID, CFS, fibromyalgia, mast cell activation, and any hypersensitive nervous system issues. So always remember that you are a thriver and you are just one mind shift away from living a life with thriving health. I'll see you in the next video.